Welcome to the Pickle Barrel Fantasy Football Podcast. July 26, 2016, Season 2, Episode 7. I'm Andy.
And I'm Frank.
Well, the NBA is pulling their All-Star game out of Charlotte, North Carolina because of a perceived anti-trans bill. I thought after you had surgery realignment, you didn't need to pull out. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are officially their nominees, and the country is fucked. And fantasy players are dropping like flies left and right. Le'Veon Bell, now Jordy Nelson with a little knee twinge.
Yep.
Hopefully he's back before the season starts.
Hopefully. Yeah, we're finally starting to get some fantasy relevant news, and it's the fucking worst kind.
Yeah, exactly. The dark days of June and July, dark because there was no news, have turned into the dark days of July and August because there's bad news. Mm-hmm. Not too much good stuff going on right now, but
also Josh Gordon's back.
That is a good news. I'm happy to see him back. We won't get into the whole marijuana debate.
Yeah.
Other than it being total bullshit that he was suspended in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm glad to see that Free Gordon has accomplished its mission, and maybe he'll see the field. Where do you draft him?
I mean, probably around the 6th if I was going to take him. But I think he'll probably end up going earlier just because of the hype surrounding the name.
Probably.
So.
You're right, exactly. I got him in my 7th round. I did my top 100 today, and I had him at number 68, right next to Emmanuel Sanders and Sean Jackson. That
makes sense, yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, you're right. He'll probably end up going higher. But we'll jump straight into it. It's the NFC South today.
Yep.
And Frank's going to start off with the Tennessee Titans, the wonderkins of fantasy football.
Oh, yes. The Titans, they were an interesting team this offseason. They, of course, if you remember, had the first overall pick because they had the shittiest record last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, they were able to trade it away to the Rams and get a whole bunch of picks. So they did a good job with that. I think in a couple more years, we're gonna see this team turn around again. But real quick for the draft, they could have got. They were gonna. This baffled me, but I mean it's because we've talked about it before. Jeremy Tunsil. That's who they were gonna draft.
Exactly. Shore up that O-line.
And they actually got after they traded back because of the whole pot gas mask thing. They actually got a shot at Jeremy Tunsil. They could have taken the guy they wanted in the first round, but they passed and they took another offensive tackle, Jack Conklin. So he's supposed to be pretty good too. So I'm sure it was a good pick. But, man, you maybe missed out on the guy that you should have had. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. They also got Kevin Dodd, a highly touted defensive tackle out of Clemson, and Derrick Henry in the second round, as well as another defensive tackle. And then after that, they pretty much went offensive line and defense. So I think they got a lot of pretty good position players that are going to help them out in the years to come with Henry. Shoring up their O-line and a good bit of defensive players. I think they did pretty good. They had 10 overall picks, and they had 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. So that was pretty nice, yeah.
So pretty much a good split between offensive line and did they get a wide receiver?
They did. They picked a wide receiver back in the 5th round, and I don't have his name written down, but they did. So they did pick some other guys. Yeah, I mean, that's probably a spot they still need to work on.
Yeah, but I mean, I just had to imagine if you have that many picks in the first 3 rounds, why not try to fill that gap,
Mm-hmm.
But, hey, whatever. I'm sure they know what they're doing more than I do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, presumably so. But, yeah, so, I mean, they did pretty good. I think this is a team we're going to see on the steady incline for the next few years. So it'll be fun to watch this team. Other than that, no significant moves in the off season. I'd just say they had a pretty good draft, so I think that's going to help turn around. They had the 30th ranked offensive line this last year,
wow.
So yeah, they need the help, and Marcus Mariota is definitely going to need it if he wants to stay upright and healthy. Getting into their schedule, they've got it's a pretty tough schedule. They start off week 1 with playing Minnesota. They go to Oakland. They play Houston. Play at San Diego in week 9. They get Green Bay, and they also play Denver. And that's when you get into the fantasy playoffs. They get Denver week 14, Kansas City week 15, and then at Jacksonville.
Ooh, brutal. And,
yeah,
other than Jacksonville in the playoffs. But
yeah, I mean, but even still, if that defense turns around, it could. Those could be defenses you just don't want to fuck with.
Right. I mean, especially Denver and that.
Yeah. So yeah, think about that. I mean, these players. largely on this team are plug-and-play players throughout the season. They're not guys that you're going to sit on, probably. I don't know. I could be wrong. But they're not guys you're going to sit on throughout the season and depend on, stake your fantasy life on.
Right. So who are the notables? What are the big names in parentheses?
Yeah, the big names. I'm just going to say him first just because I guess he's the star of the team.
History, really.
Yeah, well, but Marcus Mariota, 22 years old. Last year he had almost 3,000 passing yards, 19 TDs, 11 interceptions. He also ran on the ground for another 250 and 2 touchdowns. I think the guy's going to probably stay about the same, maybe get a little bit more efficient, hopefully a few more TDs, a few less interceptions. But I don't see his numbers jumping up like huge because of what you said. They don't have a lot of receivers. They've got a few guys. I'll get into them in a second, but not a lot of really impact guys that are going to help make him a better quarterback. The next guy I got is the guy they actually traded for this in the offseason, DeMarco Murray. Now, everybody knows the story of DeMarco Murray. He's had great seasons before. He's 28 years old, so he's starting to get up there in age, but he's definitely still got some good years left. Last year, he only had 700 rushing yards, 6 TDs. However, he did catch a lot of balls. He got 45 balls last year.
Well, in that Philadelphia offense, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he's definitely in the passing game a lot, and he should be when he's in
I feel like he is a really good emergency valve for Marcus Mariota.
Mm-hmm.
And, probably we'll see. I would assume that his catches probably won't go down all that much.
I don't think so either.
It's just to what effectiveness will that entire offense be?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that's really the question. You're hearing good things. The running back coaches apparently love him. Just say he's a great veteran, just a professional, just great running back. Ethic. Exactly.
Did not have a good relationship with the team in Philadelphia, but hopefully he turns that around in Tennessee.
I think he will to a degree. I still think because it is a younger offense, they're gonna there's gonna be growing pains. But I think Murray's gonna be a great player to play at certain times during the season when they're not playing horrific opponents. I think he's good to break 1,000 yards, probably somewhere around 1,100, 8 to 9 TDs, and like you said, he's probably good for another 50 catches and probably a TD or 2 in that as well.
So I'm going to give you a little who you're going to take here: Frank Gore, DeMarco Murray, or Carlos Hyde. Who are you taking out of those 3?
That's rough. Honestly, I probably like Frank Gore the most out of the 3 of them, even though he's the oldest. I mean, Carlos Hyde could do a lot. I mean, he should. He's got the opportunity, but I'm just not completely sold on the guy. And I think this is going to still be an offense where you're not going to want to play DeMarco Murray every week, unless you're sticking him in your flex or something like that. But there's going to be a lot of weeks where he only gets probably 8 to 10 points.
Yeah, I asked that because my number 58, 59, and 60 ranked players are Frank Gore, DeMarco Murray, and Carlos Hyde.
Okay, so. Gotcha.
Right, all about that in the same region.
Mm-hmm. And one more guy, I probably wouldn't normally put his name on the list, but I only will because he had a great season last year, and that's Delanie Walker. Tight end, nobody really played him much before unless you're in really deep leagues, I'd imagine. The guy's actually been pretty steady for them. He has.
I mean, he was top 5 last year.
He was.
I think he outscored Greg Olsen.
He might have. Yeah. I mean, he had 94 catches last year. 94 catches, over 1,000 yards. And only 6 TDs, I guess. I mean, but
the yards and the catches, especially in PPR, I mean, that's all day.
Yeah, I think it will regress to a degree. I think we talked about this before, that he would like to be less involved in the passing. Like, there was a lot of shit going wrong, and that's why he caught a lot of balls last year. Hopefully he's blocking more and playing that position a little bit more differently. But, I mean, not that was his fault, but I think he'll regress as a result of that. I think he's going to be under 1,000 yards. He'll still probably get about 5 TDs, and he's probably still good for about 70 catches, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Which is closer to his career averages. So I see that sort of regression, and hopefully some of these other players taking more fantasy points, like the DeMarco Murrays and such. I've just got a couple more notables real quick. Dorial Green-Beckham, I think we heard his name last year quite a bit.
I mean, he's the number 1 wide receiver there.
Yeah, you'd imagine. He's a physical freak, 6'5", 240. I mean, he's a Calvin Johnson body-type player.
Right.
If he got his shit together, he'd probably be pretty good. But he's a fuck-up. He got kicked out of school when he was in college, and apparently he's showing up a little heavy. And I mean, I hope the guy can reach his potential, but he's a guy you're probably still going to be drafting back in the probably 9th, 10th round, maybe even later.
Maybe even later. Yeah.
So
I've got him out of my top 100.
Do you? Okay. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that could. I mean, he could do real well for you, and you could get him cheap, or he could just kind of suck ass. So.
Right. I mean, which is amazing when your number one wide receiver is outside the top 100. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
2 others I got: Derrick Henry, rookie running back behind DeMarco Murray. He should get some carries, but I would expect to see that later in the year, where it might become significant. We'll see how Murray plays out. If he's sucking.
Yeah,
I'm
maybe
surprised if they stick him in.
Play him,
yeah. And then one other guy, just because he was a guy that was drafted somewhat high last year, was Kendall Hunter, and he was hurt a lot last year. He's an older guy. I don't see him doing a ton, but if he's healthy, he's probably going to go back to the number one wide receiver role if he can stay healthy. Big question mark there, but we'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got on the Titans.
All right, well, we'll move straight on into the Jags. The old Jacksonville Jaguars. There used to be a popular strategy where you'd play the defense that played the Jags because they were so bad. Things have kind of turned around in Jacksonville, but I think that the big theme for me, anyway, as I got into my research, was the R-word regression. Other than one player who I'll get into, I think the entire team, as far as those fantasy studs that you were counting on last year, is going to regress. And I'll get into why. As far as the schedule, though, 10th easiest schedule.
Nice.
So it's not really that hard. Week 5 bye. In the playoffs, you've got Minnesota, Houston, and then Tennessee.
Okay.
So just like you said, Tennessee and Jacksonville play each other.
Yeah.
Tennessee's defense, not the best. As far as the draft, they stayed on the defensive side of the ball mostly. But they did pick up 2 offensive linebackers to shore up their O-line. 0 position players that were taken.
Really?
Yeah. So just to kind of thought, I guess we pretty much got it. They picked up Chris Ivory in the offseason, as well as 2 guards on the offensive line. So they really worked on shoring up their offensive line, which last year was ranked 19th overall. Problem with their offensive line, and I'm going to get into why this is important. They have a really shitty pass blocking offensive line. It's actually their run blocking, which is pretty good. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really make sense because last year, when you think of it, T.J. Yeldon, really not even on the fantasy radar.
Yeah.
But all the other guys passing and catching, well, they were fucking great. Whether it was Blake Bortles or whether it was Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
So, but basically, they're going to stay about where they are. I don't see really their pass blocking game getting that much better. It'll get a little bit better. But if they're going to be more competitive, which I assume they will be because they concentrated so much on defense, I expect them to be a more run-heavy team.
Yeah, it only makes sense. I mean, they'll be closer games, so they can run it more often. They won't have to chuck it downfield for Hail Marys for the Allen twins.
And it's just like, if the games are closer, that's just what is going to happen. It's not a question of, will that happen? I think if they can be a more competitive defense, which it looks like they will be, I don't see the garbage time being there. And when you couple that with shitty pass blocking, so last year they had to pass because they had no choice.
Yeah.
But this year they might have the choice. And then once that choice is presented to them, all right, our offensive line is not good at pass blocking, but they're really good at run blocking. What's the natural inclination going to be?
You'll run.
You're going to run it. So, I mean, those 2 factors combined really makes me think that it's regression. It's going to be regression essential. So we'll go ahead and get into the notables. Blake Bortles, he actually spent part of his offseason taking notes from Aaron Rodgers and Carson Palmer. Called him up and even, I think, visited them. So, hopefully that bodes well for his personal game. I'm not saying that just getting on the phone with the guys is going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah.
But last year, he really was a volume guy. At the end of the day, he was all volume. Garbage time guy, the entire team was. I played him in the fantasy finals. Blake Bortles did great for me. He scored 48 points in the fantasy finals. But it was he's only scored 10 up until garbage time.
God,
and
so
then just
terrifying.
went off. Oh, yeah, it sucked because it was only until the 4th quarter, and then he scored 3 touchdowns, but they were already losing by 5 or 5 touchdowns or something like that.
I gotcha.
So, yeah, I've downgraded him. I used to have him in my top 10. I think I had him top 8 even. I've really downgraded him since then, since our first podcast. He's my number 12 QB now.
Makes sense.
Last year, put up a line of 4,428 passing yards, 35 TDs. Great numbers.
Oh, yeah.
310 rush yards with 2 touchdowns on the ground, but 18 interceptions and 5 fumbles. So 23 turnovers by himself.
Yeah, it's a little high, a little Eli Manning-esque. but
yeah, for sure. I mean, almost worse. But because of the regression, because I think he's going to be handing off the ball to Chris Ivory a little bit more, I've got him projected for 3,928 touchdowns, as well as 300 still on the ground, but only 2 touchdowns. But I think he lowers his interceptions because he doesn't have to pass as much. I think he cuts them in half to 9.
Makes sense.
Yep. Moving on to Allen Robinson, pretty much at this point considered the most valuable fantasy player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Again, though, I think because he'll be more competitive, he doesn't put up the ridiculous stats he had last year. Like, last year was insane what he did. 1,400 yards for 14 touchdowns.
It was, yeah. It's kind of bizarre. You didn't even realize until halfway through the season how good he was doing.
I mean, I remember when old Johnny Motts picked him up in the 5th round, everybody laughed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like a universal everybody laughed. And John, like, he gave this sheepish look, was like, I thought he was supposed to be good. But John had the last laugh, as well as the keeper, which I still think he's a great keeper, but I just don't see him getting 80 catches for 1,400 yards this year.
Yeah, I don't think he'll do that, but I mean, he was definitely sleeper value last year.
Oh, for sure.
Great value.
But I think he's far overvalued this year. I put him more.
I agree.
I put him more at a 65, 1,150 yards for maybe 10 touchdowns, and that might be generous even still. A wide receiver 2, mid-range guy, brings me into Allen Hurns, the other part of the Allen twins. This guy, I would not draft this guy very high, personally. Some concern, especially with Julius Thomas there. He had 10 TDs last year. And, I mean, for a wide receiver 2 on a crappy team, which the Jaguars, I think, still are kind of like that mediocre team, I mean, that's just, like, insane. Like, you don't get a wide receiver 2 that gets 10 TDs.
That's true.
So I think another big regression here. 50 catches for 800 yards and 5 TDs. I maybe draft him as a flex option. A guy on my bench, I don't think he's going to be that regular plug and play. I don't think he's going to be the regular play he was last year.
Where do you like him? Like maybe 8th round, in terms of value.
Exactly, 8th round, exactly. Late 8th is where I have him, right in between Dante Moncrief and the next guy I'm going to talk about, Julius Thomas.
Okay.
So a lot of people not very high on Julius Thomas. I think this is the one guy that I think you are getting a value at for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I agree.
Julius Thomas makes up for some of his lost numbers. A comeback year, I think I'm almost positive he'll be a top 8 tight end. Because I think
so.
He turns into a red zone target.
Yeah, and that's why. He's always been a red zone fucking beast. It was absurd the things he would do with Peyton back, 2 years ago. 3 touchdowns a game, like, all the fucking time.
Right. In fact, if I had to put my money on it, who's going to get 10 touchdowns, Allen Hurns or Julius Thomas, I'd put, 2-to-1 odds it's going to be Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
He gets closer to 10 than Hurns does.
Definitely.
I've got him projected for 909. Which puts him right up there in the top 8 of the tight ends. And I think his upside is way higher. I think he could be a 10-touchdown tight end, which might be crazy, but I think it's there, especially if they have to play behind. So I don't think they're going to be playing behind as much, but he's up there if he does.
Yeah.
All right, then we got to talk about the running back situation because I think the best value on the board is probably Chris Ivory. Him and Julius Thomas. I expect similar numbers compared to last year when he was on the Jets. Maybe even a little bit better. Last year, he had basically 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, 300 yards in the air with 3 touchdowns. I think he puts up very similar numbers there. T.J. Yeldon, though, he's pretty much a weak handcuffed. As a starter, had a dismal year, but if I choose Chris Ivory and I decide to go with the late running back strategy, something I look at is at least keeping an eye on T.J. Yeldon. I don't even know he gets drafted. Maybe so.
He might. It'd be real late. With Ivory there now, it looks like it's Ivory's show.
Yeah, I would assume so. I expect them to use Ivory at the goal line more so than they used T.J. Yeldon at the goal line, which was almost never.
Yeah.
Right. All right, and that concludes the Jags. Again, the big word is regression. I would say temper your expectations and pump the brakes on the Jaguars. Johnny Motts is going to kill me because his keeper is Allen Robinson. He's going to say I'm being biased, but I just don't see it working out the same way it did last year.
I think you're right. I think both Hurns and Robinson are going to regress.
Yeah.
And
Bortles.
Bortles, yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, let me get on into the Texans. Houston Texans. They had a pretty good draft. Got 2 wide receivers early, Will Fuller and Braxton Miller, the former QB out of Ohio State. They also got a center, Nick Martin, in the 2nd round, and got a couple defensive players towards the back of their draft. But pretty good draft. They've already got a pretty good defense. they brought in a couple guys in the offseason you all should know by now. Quarterback Brock Osweiler and Lamar Miller from Miami. So
yeah,
big
moves.
Yeah, that's where they got the big moves. Other than that, the defense stayed largely the same. They just made a lot of improvements on their offense. So,
how do you feel about them as a defensive play? As far as like, where do they fall compared to the Cardinals, compared to the Panthers, compared to the Seahawks?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Right now, I just read this today. Unfortunately, J.J. Watt is hurt with a herniated disc, so that's not good. And Jadeveon Clowney, we've been waiting for this.
Clowney.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this guy. He's still hurt, and they're not sure that he's gonna ever reach his potential. So, I don't know. I figured JJ's gonna find a way to get back somehow. He's a freak, but maybe that's kind of the injury that you might just not be able to play when your back's fucked up like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Their defense stayed roughly the same. I think if their offense is playing well, they have a lot of other good defensive players,
especially if they can keep the ball on the ground, run out some clock, and it won't put so much pressure on them.
Yeah, exactly. Control the game more. Then I think they'll do better. I think they're a good play, especially if they're playing weaker teams, obviously. But I think they're going to be a better play than they were last year. Getting into their schedule is somewhat difficult. They play at New England. They, of course, play Indianapolis twice. Week 7, they play at Denver. That sucks. They've got a Week 9 bye. And then we get into their fantasy playoffs at Green Bay Week 13. Might be interesting. Might be they might have to score a lot of points. Could be a good play for some of the receivers or something like that.
Yeah.
Then they play at Indy in Week 14 and against Jacksonville in Week 15. So, so. I'm sorry, Cincy in Week 16.
Okay, got
so
it.
that's another tougher defense.
Defense, yeah.
But definitely probably viable to some degree in the fantasy playoffs. Getting into the actual impact players with regard to fantasy, there's not much in terms of their players.
Yeah, the Texans. There's the one guy.
Yeah, there's the one guy.
2 guys, really.
Well, 2 guys. Yeah. 2 guys in the first round,
yeah.
really. We got DeAndre Hopkins and Lamar Miller. DeAndre Hopkins, only 24, probably about to sign a big-ass contract. 2015, he had 111 catches for over 1,500 yards and 11 TDs. Only dropped the ball twice last year. Fucking the guy is it's him or Odell Beckham who probably have the best hands in football. I don't know.
And he is also just a physical freak and a great route runner. So it's like not quite the physical freak that Julio Jones is, not quite maybe the route runner AJ Green is, but somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And there's DeAndre Hopkins.
Oh yeah, he's a beast. This next year, I think you will see a slight regression, only because he was basically the only playmaker on the team last year, excluding the brief period of time Arian Foster showed up. But next year, I think he's good for 100 catches again, probably somewhere around 1,400 yards and 10 TDs again. So I think he's a great, safe, early first-round pick, in my opinion.
Mid-first round?
Yeah, I'd say mid-first round, yeah. I think he should go probably in the top, definitely in the top 7 picks.
And we've talked about this, like, he's just safer than some of the running back options. So even if he ends up at the lower end of the Tier 1 wide receivers, right behind the Julio Joneses and the Odell Beckhams, he's still a great pick in the first round.
Oh, absolutely. I think he's a top 5 wide receiver.
Right. And that kind of makes him a top 5 guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not quite top 5, but certain close.
Very close to
depending
the top 5.
on the type of scoring your league has.
Yeah. Then the next guy, I already mentioned him, 25-year-old Lamar Miller, who they traded for in the offseason. Everybody's wanted Miller for the last 2 years to finally get his fantasy due that he deserves.
Right.
Fuck. Last year, he didn't even get to carry the ball 200 times. Had less than 1,000 yards, but had ATTs, and his yards per carry average was quite high as well. I think because of the way Houston historically plays, I think they're a run-heavy team. They tend to be. Last year they had to throw the ball, but I think this next year he's definitely going to get 250 carries. He might get close to 300. So I think he's good for about 1,400 yards, 10 TDs. For me, I see him very similar to a player like Zeke Elliott in terms of what their production should be. I guess maybe the only advantage Zeke would have is maybe a better offensive line. But Miller has experience, so there's,
he's going from a team that inexplicably just wouldn't run him to a team that you assume is going to.
Yeah, I mean, he should. I don't see how it doesn't happen, barring injury, of course.
Right,
but
right.
I mean, he's got to carry the ball at least 250 times. It's his fourth year in the league, I believe. Yeah, I mean,
and right in that running back prime, 25 years old. I mean,
25, perfect age.
Right.
So he should let it rip this year. He should be great.
I mean, at 25, you can bang the 18-year-olds, and you can bang the 35-year-olds, and no one blinks an eye.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm sure he's doing plenty of that shit. But yeah, so draft him with plenty of confidence towards probably the end of the first round. Just based on how it goes. He some people are going to get him in the second round too, and that's great. You'll love him, I'm sure. The last guy I got, and honestly, he's probably not a guy that's going to get drafted in a lot of leagues, is another 25-year-old, Brock Osweiler. 2015, only played 8 games because of Peyton Manning and his miserable final season.
I would say that Brock Osweiler, and I bet you the stats would play this out, probably did better statistically than Peyton Manning did.
I wish I would have actually looked at that and compared it, but I believe you're right, especially because of the interceptions Peyton was throwing last year. It was horrific. But yeah, he last year in only 8 games had almost 2,000 passing yards, 10 TDs, and 6 interceptions. So not a lot of touchdowns, which was kind of the disappointing thing with him. Just didn't have a lot of touchdowns. This next year, I think he's probably good for 3,500 yards. He'll probably get closer to maybe 22, 25 touchdowns, and interceptions will probably tick up. Probably go plus 10, but we'll see. I think he's a good plug and play guy. Another plug and play. Depending on what your quarterback's bye week is, if they're playing a shittier defense, he's probably going to get some points. You never know. Or somebody will force a shootout. Probably not a guy you're drafting though. So unless you're in deeper leagues, there's plenty of other guys.
Right.
10-team league, he's definitely not a guy.
And you're right. I mean, the Houston Texans, you look at them, there's really like those 3 fantasy kind of relevant guys. Brock Osweiler probably maybe doesn't even get drafted though anyway. But who's the backups? And are there any good handcuffs? Are there any decent plays on wide receiver? I mean,
there's a lot of question marks with that, actually. I would say I've got 3 notables, and 2 of them are rookies, so good luck knowing.
Right.
But Will Fuller, that first-round pick, and Braxton Miller, the third-round pick.
The quarterback?
Yeah, the quarterback. I've heard great things out of their OTAs so far. We'll see what happens when training camp starts. But, I mean, I think those 2 are potentially pretty good. There's also Jalen Strong, who they drafted earlier last year, but he's kind of been a fuck-up so far. So I would look at those 2 rookies and see which one comes out of that. But I mean, maybe both of them could be good. Maybe they can help Brock Osweiler be a really fucking good quarterback.
Right.
You never know. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all I got on the Houston Texans.
All right. Well, then we move into really the division's biggest fantasy play, and that's the Colts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the old Colts. Yeah. Last year, not really a good fantasy play because of injuries with Andrew Luck. Concerns about the offensive line, but this year they have the 11th easiest schedule with a Week 10 bye.
Nice.
They're facing Oakland in your fantasy football finals.
Okay.
So solid play. Well, I mean,
they could have a pretty good defense.
Pretty good defense, but I mean,
it's Andrew Luck and the Colts.
Exactly. Here's the thing: with their draft, they picked again, like the Jags, no position players whatsoever. Okay. They focus solely on the offensive line and the defense.
I got you.
And they really locked it down on defense. Their first round pick and their third round pick were offensive linemen.
Okay.
And yeah, lock down Luck for $140 million over 6. I think that's a great play for them.
Oh, definitely.
So right now he's the highest paid NFL player right now, making a little bit less than the average NBA player. But you pick the sport you pick.
Yeah.
They drafted Ryan Kelly at center from Alabama. He will start. So in addition to picking up some guys on the offensive line and acquisitions, that is a huge pickup. From Alabama, he was pretty much regarded as one of the best centers in college football at the time. Lost Kobe Fleener for Dwayne Allen, so basically making Dwayne Allen the guy at tight end. So
pretty good for Dwayne Allen.
Sneaky pick right there.
Oh yeah.
I'll get into him a little bit later. But here's the thing: they also got a new offensive coordinator in Ryan Philbin with offensive line coaching experience.
Okay.
So that's a big thing for me. I think that the theme of the Colts this year is offensive line. They did almost everything in their power to make sure that O-line gets better.
Got to protect old Luck.
They do. I mean, they did not do a good job of doing that last year. I think it's going to be the league's most improved unit this year. Ranked number 13 overall by Pro Football Focus. I think they're going to make that improvement on that, which is odd because they were ranked 13 in all the stats Didn't seem to play out that way with Luck getting hurt and stuff. But I think overall he turns into this unit turns into a super awesome unit. And they have the potential for a huge year. Last year ranked 10th in pass blocking. I think that gets even better. All right, notables. Straight into notables. Andrew Neckbeard, Nerdbeard Luck, the Stanford nerd himself. I think people are not paying him the due he deserves this year.
Yeah, it's weird how he's just kind of being hated on. I mean, everybody forgot what he did in 2014. I mean, he was fucking amazing that year.
He was not only amazing, there were people saying draft him number 1.
Oh, yeah.
I saw him ranked today, and I shit you not, I saw him ranked today 65th overall. Overall, like next to the likes of Zach Ertz.
What the fuck? What are you thinking, people?
Yes, and this was an ESPN analyst, and
Jesus Christ.
I just don't see that. So over 7 games last year, this is what people are seeing, and I think they're blocking out his rookie year and everything up to 2014. In 2015, he only passed in 7 games for 1,800 yards and 15 touchdowns, but he was hurt.
He was.
He had a lacerated fucking kidney. He had a shitty O-line that fell apart on him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I honestly think, as I went into my research, I'm going to blaspheme myself and say I actually moved him to my number 1 quarterback spot.
Really?
I moved him ahead of Rodgers.
Interesting.
I don't see Rodgers necessarily getting the volume that Luck will get, and I think at this point Luck is going to be hungry. He's going to be hungry.
That's what we said last year about him, is that he has the greater potential for fantasy volume.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the defense is not as good as Green Bay's defense, especially as the Green Bay has gone up. Their schedule is easier, or roughly the same as Green Bay's. And I'm getting super hard on Luck right now.
I can understand that.
I really think they're going to turn around their own line with the coach, with the offensive pickup, with the pickups that they've made. I think this year they turn it around on that O-line, and it's one of the better units, certainly one of the better units in the division, and I think one of the better units in the entire NFL. So I've got a big old projection for him for 4,800 passing yards, 40 TDs, and 200 yards on the ground, and 3 TDs. Kidney's totally healed. He's back. This was a headline in February. No worries about the kidney. And he's a top 30 play, period. He's a top 30. I've got him in my top 20 at this point.
I can completely understand that.
So I say, if you get Neckbeard in the 3rd, you bite on that shit.
Fuck yeah.
Especially if you're in a league like ours where the passing TDs are worth 6.
Oh, yeah.
I'm all about the Neckbeard this year. I say, use last year's injury to your advantage.
Exploit it.
Yeah.
Get the value.
I think about it this way, right? Look at the Jeremy Hills from last year of the world. Look at the guys that do super well in the last few games, and people draft them really high, and they overdraft them. I say, look at the guy who got hurt last year. Look at the guy who didn't play well last year that has a history of doing really well, and then use that to your advantage. And so instead of taking the bait like a fish on a hook, you're the sneaky guy that's like, all right, I'll take Luck in the 3rd, when he maybe should be going in the 2nd or even the 1st if he does what I think he can do.
Yeah,
so a bold prediction. But I've got him as my number 1 quarterback now.
I don't think it's that bold, but it's. I think it's a good call. Really stating that Andrew Luck is still a beast, and he's going to be a fucking beast this next year.
I think at this point, I'm looking with the 25th pick. I'm taking him if he falls to me.
I don't blame you.
I still have hard times because my heartstrings are with Rodgers, as AJ so adequately pointed out the last podcast.
He did.
And I still would rather have a threesome with Rodgers and Olivia Munn than Neckbeard and whoever his fucking girl's taking. But as far as fantasy terms, I might take Neckbeard over him.
Yeah.
All right, so that moves us into T.Y. Hilton. I think he sees a big jump. Last year had 70 catches for 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns, which still is not a bad year. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's still very playable. He sees a big jump, I think, this year to 1,300 yards and 11 TDs. Wide receiver 2 with high upside into wide receiver 1 territory.
Okay.
And so, I don't know, where are you taking him? Late 3rd?
Yeah, we'll see. I think he's probably going to go late 3rd, early 4th, and I think that makes sense just because of all the other players that are on the board. But I think he's good for. We saw what he did in 2014. He's not going to get as many touchdowns as he will yardage because he's a smaller, quick guy.
True, yeah.
But he's gonna get a lot of targets. That's for sure.
Yeah, maybe my touchdowns are a little high there. Maybe temper that to maybe 9. But Moncrief also going to see a small bump. Last year only had 733 yards for 6 touchdowns. Clearly the number 2 guy, though.
Oh, yeah.
Philip Dorsett possibly could take over that
we've heard his name since last year.
But I think he goes for at least 1,000 yards and about 6-7 TDs.
Okay.
So wide receiver 3, right around the mid-range wide receiver 3 guy. Not a bad guy to have on your team.
Definitely not. Definitely a guy there's going to be great weeks to play him.
For sure. And then we have Philip Dorsett, a sneaky late-round flyer potential there. I wouldn't draft him with anything maybe the 10th round,
Philip Dorsett?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can probably get him really late.
Yeah,
I don't
true.
even know if he's a guy that's getting drafted that high. Maybe in deeper leagues, but 10-team leagues, you can probably get him back in 14.
Yeah, true.
Just take flyers back there with him. I think you will, but I could be wrong.
And then we got Dwayne Allen. He pretty much shit on himself last year. Did not do well even in the games he played. But Kobe Fleener was there.
Yeah.
Kobe Fleener's gone. There's not that many big targets for Luck to pass to in the red zone. So I think that bodes well for him. I think he has his biggest year yet. Goes for about 750 to 850 yards and somewhere between that 8 and 10 touchdown range. I think he could possibly even get into double-digit touchdowns.
I could definitely see him being a top 5 guy.
Yeah.
If Luck starts killing it, he's going to be one of his main red zone targets. There's no doubt. So
Absolutely. Then we got to talk about old Frank Melisandre, old Methuselah Gore, the ageless wonder, the timeless beast. Will he ever stop? I mean, he's still the number one. He's still number one on the depth chart. We'll see how. I would pay very close attention during minicamp, during the preseason games. I mean, they're not going to play that much in the preseason, I'd assume.
Yeah.
But look at the young studs coming up, specifically Robert Turbin. I think if you draft Frank Gore in, say, the 6th round or wherever he's going, maybe 5th round if you're really high on him, I think you need to get Robert Turbin as his backup. I think because of his age, you look at him and you say, all right, Robert Turbin could potentially take over. Just because of his age. Nothing else, not because of the innate talent, but just because maybe he loses his legs this year. Maybe this is a year.
It could, but I mean, he's played. I mean, this is like his 12th season or something like that. I mean, he's. I think he's really proven that he's just one of those guys that's super durable. So
Right.
he's going to be slowed down, but I really like him for over 1,000 yards this next year.
I mean, I do too. I
could get close to 10 TDs on the goal line shit.
I'm just very hesitant. He's eventually going to lose his legs. He's eventually going to have the Andre Johnson syndrome from last year. I know he's a wide receiver, but I mean, he cannot run that well. I mean, but 36.
I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean, he won't be playing then, but
I just remember like in our first year of really playing fantasy football was 2011, and he was already old.
I think he's 31 or something, right? Did you say how old he was?
No, he's way older than that. I think he's like
maybe 32. He's not old.
You don't think so? You don't think?
Nah, he's
He's
like
got to be at least 33.
He might be 33, but definitely not any older than that.
Right, we'll
he's early 30s, but yeah.
All right, but I still think you draft Robert Turbin as late as you want, or just pick him up off the waiver wire afterwards. He's not going in any drafts that I've seen.
Yeah.
Just as a cheap and necessary handcuff, because there's a possibility. And
For
anytime
sure.
the guy's getting up there. Then I'm going to mention one guy. We haven't mentioned this position whatsoever, but Vinatieri. Volume and value Vinatieri.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, no. Get all those fucking extra points. I mean, if Luck's ripping off touchdowns left and right, they add up.
And maybe they stall a little bit in the red zone, kicking those field goals. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, and that is pretty much it for the Colts. Next, we're going to do the NFC East, which brings us who's in the.
We got the Cowboys, the Eagles.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Redskins and Giants.
A very fantasy relevant.
Exactly.
Some big stuff to talk about, whether it's Zeke Elliott or some interesting stuff on the Eagles and the Giants, ODB, all that stuff. So that'll be a fun one.
Oh yeah.
So join us next week as we break down the NFC East. Thank you for joining us, guys. Like us on Facebook,
YouTube. Leave a comment.
Yeah, leave a comment. And if you got something, if you got any sort of questions or comments, just leave them, and we'll address it in the very next episode. I promise you, we're not getting that much.
Absolutely, please, guys.
All right, this is Andy signing off,
and Frank.
Pickle,